Oh man, I can't thank Prep enough for what they did for me personally. Again, it wasn't always easy.
Yeah.
And I gotta emphasize that to anybody listening. Life is not easy. And there's gonna be pitfalls and there's gonna be roadblocks. Don't put them up yourself, which is the first thing I can tell you. And the second thing is go around them when you have them. Because there's always an end game.
Yeah.
And Prep gave me the motivation, the drive, and the success in my mind of what's out there to reach.
Yeah. Welcome to the Rambler podcast. My name is Jimmy Smith, and I am your host. I am a proud member of the Cathedral Prep class of 2011, and I work here at Prep in our advancement office. So let me tell you, I have an awesome episode for you in store with Jerry Clark. He shares some incredible leadership lessons that he has experienced through his career, and I know that you are going to get a ton of value from hearing what he has to say. But before we get into that, I first just want to tell you about the car raffle project we're doing in a corporate partnership with NFI Empire. We are going to be raffling off a 725 horsepower custom-built Dodge Challenger SRT. If you haven't seen a photo or video of the car yet, go check it out because it is bad to the bone. The engine alone was $25,000. So here's the thing. We are only selling 1,500 tickets, and then we're going to be pulling the winner. So we're not just going to be doing some deadline date, selling as many tickets as we can. There's only a limited number of tickets available, and tickets are $100 for one and $250 for three. And you can get your tickets by going to www.cathedralprep.com/car raffle. And if you win the car but decide you would want a cash prize instead, NFI Empire is prepared to do that, and they will write you a check for $25,000. So please, we ask that you go support our students here at Cathedral Prep by participating in this fun project, because the money that we're going to raise through doing this car raffle is going to go back to the school to help fund projects with the students, activities, what have you, to help support the students here at Prep. So again, please go to www.cathedralprep.com/car raffle to go get your ticket today. So now, without further ado, let's get into this episode of the Rambler podcast featuring Jerry Clark. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 51 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. On this episode of the podcast, we are thrilled to have Jerry Clark on as a guest. With over 35 years of invaluable experience in law enforcement and security, Jerry has dedicated his career to serving at the highest levels of federal agencies. Throughout his tenure as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Drug Enforcement Administration, and Naval Criminal Investigative Services, he has led intricate investigations and played pivotal roles in major cases, notably as the lead investigator on the infamous collar bomb case, also known as the pizza bomber case, a landmark in the FBI's history. His academic journey, culminating in a PhD in public safety with a specialization in criminal justice, alongside a rich array of publications, reflects his commitment to advancing the field through research and education. As the chair of the Criminal Justice Department at Gannon University, Jerry is actively shaping the next generation of law enforcement professionals. Additionally, as the president and owner of Fisher Security, he is at the helm of a company dedicated to providing top-tier protective services and intelligence solutions. His multifaceted expertise spans various domains, including public safety leadership, forensic psychology, SWAT tactics, and threat assessment, all of which have been honed through extensive training and hands-on experience in the field. Jerry's contributions extend beyond the realm of academia and private security as well, as he has been featured on numerous national television networks and media outlets for his insights and expertise. From captivating documentaries to insightful interviews, Jerry has shared his knowledge with audiences worldwide. Through media consultation and an impressive array of publications, including books that have garnered attention from major production houses, he continued to leverage his expertise to inform, educate, and inspire others within the realm of law enforcement and beyond. Jerry, we are so proud to have you on the podcast, and I have to mention class of 1978 as well, as Cathedral Prep.
That's probably the one of the most famous things that I've done, class of 78. I am so proud to have been from that class, and really as a Rambler in general, and all the people that have come before me, all the alumni that are out there doing amazing things, and I'm just proud to be part of that.
Yeah, well, we were talking off the air, but right before we were recording, I've had Judge Trussell on as a guest, who's a classmate of yours. I had Tim DeCastro on as a guest, and just the amount of success your class has had. A lot of your classmates and whatnot, what they've gone on to accomplish. Of course, other classes as well, but particularly the class of 1978. I'm sure you're just proud to be a member of that class.
Oh, that class is just spectacular, and we always brag that it's the best, but they're all good. But we certainly like to think we're the best. And when I look down the list, and we had talked a little bit about this before air, but you think about 210 students at the time, and one time we looked, and the number of lawyers at over 30, I think we were counting, and PhDs and DOs, MDs, and really just highly successful people in insurance and in government. And I just I can't tell you how happy I am to be here, and to share some of my experience with that.
Yeah, well, we're real excited to have you on, and I think one of the things, just talking about class of 1978, is how you even decided to come to prep. What was the decision like for you back then, deciding to come to prep? It
is a really unique story, and not many people know it because I don't really talk about it all that often, but I was actually in the Mill Creek school system. So I went through, all the way up till 8th grade in the Mill Creek school system. And I'll never forget this. In the summer before 9th grade, my parents said, hey, you're not focused, you're not motivated, you're not really up to your potential, you're going to go to prep. And it was the biggest, like, what? How can that even happen? And I couldn't even believe it myself. And they said, no, this is what you're going to do, and this is going to be the best thing for you. And at the time, I was just in shock. I was. And as it turned out, I have to give all of the credit to my parents, my mom and my dad, for saying this is going to be what's best for you. And looking back now, it couldn't have been a better decision.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times I have kids of my own now, and so it changes your perspective, how you see things. And I often think about, when I get to the point and talk to them about high school, and of course I work for prep, I'm a proud rebel, I want them to go to prep, but I also start to think, how much of it should I have that hand to say, no, this is where you're going because it's the best place for you, and I know that. So kudos to your parents for, doing that.
And again, I'm not here to disparage any other, school district or anything like that. It's just for me and what I needed and what my push was. Yeah. It couldn't have been a better thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're recording this in our advancement house, which is the former headmaster house. Yes. And we were saying Dollinger was the headmaster when you were here.
Exactly. Father Dollinger, Father Bible. And so we had a lot of really great leadership at the time, and I know we still continue to this day to have. And so I think that's what makes the success out of here. And in my career, it's all about leadership.
And I'm excited to get into those topics with you here in a minute, and just kind of reflecting on your time at prep. So now you're a student and you're here at prep. What are some of your best memories when you look back from your time as a Rambler?
I swear, I don't even know if they do this anymore, but they used to have this movie day. Okay. And so everyone would go into the auditorium and they'd show a movie, and you could bring in food and sandwiches and sit in the auditorium. And I swear to God, I forgot. I think the movie was The Getaway or something with Steve McQueen, and just sit with your classmates and yucking it up and having a ball. Yeah. It was one of the best memories that I had. And then I was thinking of some other memories, and it had to be, the bus trips, to the sporting events. You go to basketball state playoffs, or and again, it's all about food for me. So bringing food in, and everybody's eating on the bus. Oh, it was crazy. And we just, those are some of the most, great memories. Now, you would think there's academics in there and some other good things going on, but for me, I just love those events that we did.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the bus trips. So my sophomore year, our basketball team made a really deep run in the playoffs. And I also remember those trips out to Sharon, PA, and wherever we were playing. And you get the whole school basically. It felt like in the student section, cheering on your brothers out there on the court. And those were special times and memories that I cherish.
No doubt. And you'd look and there'd be a line of like 6, 7 buses. Just full. And we didn't have a ton of students maybe at the time, like the big schools that we'd go play against.
Right.
But everyone in our school was there.
Yep.
And all with that same goal. So it just great memories.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of good times for sure. And, fun those connections you make in high school. And they just, especially at prep, they just last a lifetime, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they continue to this day.
Yeah.
And that's the uniqueness of Cathedral Prep. The people that we're talking about today are still really, really close friends of mine.
Yeah.
And I see them on a regular basis. And it doesn't go away. And the connectivity is just amazing. You know, you see someone and the first thing you're saying is, what class? You know, what class?
Yep.
And, you know, it doesn't even matter to the number. Although 78, we have that special thing. But no, it doesn't even matter the number.
Yeah.
You know, you just knew that they went through what you went through.
And it's funny also because you do have, faculty members and headmasters who are here for a long extended period of time where you're kind of connected to classes because you share similar teachers and whatnot. Like for me, Bob Achille, as a teacher, he's been here for 45 years now. So for those amount of time, if you had him as a teacher, you share a connection with that person regardless of what class you graduated in.
He's teaching children of children. It's incredible how long he's been around. So that's, you don't get that anywhere else, and that's what makes it unique.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. I always love reflecting a little bit with our guests on here about, their time at Prep or when we have a Villa alum on their time at Villa and just what makes these institutions so special and unique and, what helps as a factor in terms of your success you've had in your career. Are there certain aspects when you think about your time at Prep that played a role into becoming, the man you are today and the success you've had?
There's no question there's a correlation for me between what I learned at Prep and because when I made that transition, it was not easy. I didn't know a lot of people because I didn't go to the parochial system, and so I had to fit in. I had to persist. My academics I had to work on very hard. I don't know if they still give deficiency reports if they send those out, but when I was here, you'd get these deficiency reports saying, "Hey, you're not doing so well in this class." And my father would get so upset, and he'd say, they're going to have to use bulk mail for you because you're getting so many of these at one time. And I said, well, I'm trying, but so that persistence of learning how to become a better student, how to get more academic, and how to fit in were qualities that I took with me forever, into different agencies that I went to and all the rest of my life, really.
It's almost like training ground, right? Prep really prepares you for life by the training ground that you go through the academics, sports, whatever it is during the time that you are a student.
No doubt about it. And I think it helped, my brothers who came behind me, increasingly did better. Greg was, a fantastic student and now is a CEO of a company in Cleveland. And obviously Chris Clark, my brother, Dr. Chris Clark, ranked 1. So, at certain levels of his time here and has gone on to do amazing things. So hopefully what they saw me go through and saw me transitioning into, they learned from. And to me, that's what makes me most proud.
I think I'm going to make sure I let Chris know that you paved the way for Chris.
I like to think that their success came on the shoulders of my failure. So
it's part of it, right? It's part of their journey is knowing their big brother paved the way for them.
Paved the way. There's actually a funny story about that. My brother Chris came behind me, obviously, and was so smart. And they said, "Oh my gosh, your brother went here?" And they said, "Your brother had to be Ed Clark, who's our cousin, who, is a doctor, a nephrologist, really smart, one of the smartest people I know, in fact." And he said, "No, my brother was actually Jerry." And they're going, oh, no way. It couldn't have been Jerry. It had to be Ed. So I always tell Chris that's, his growth came from me.
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah, a lot of his success is credited back to you.
I like to claim that. Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Chris is actually one of my first, I think my very first podcast guest.
Was he
actually.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of used him as a guinea pig a little bit. I told him, I said, I'm launching this podcast. It was about 2 years ago. So I'd love to have you on because it's going to be a little trial and error, but I appreciate that. And it was awesome. It went great. But yeah, he was our first guest I had on the podcast.
He's a unique individual. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
I'm proud of my whole family, my
Yes.
sister and my wife and my kids. If I failed to mention like that, I'd be remiss because I'm just so proud of what I've been able to learn from here that I've been able to pass along. And so that's really very important to me.
Yeah. And so you go through your time at prep and kind of transitioning now, talking about topics of, leadership, success principle you've learned through your career. What even inspired you to pursue a career in law enforcement and security?
Yeah, it's funny. I was walking over here, and I always keep this picture at my desk. So my father, I know everybody can't see it out there, but it's a picture of my father, who was one of the original Mill Creek police officers.
Wow.
So when Mill Creek first formed the police department, and so I carry his picture with me everywhere I go because his inspiration on law enforcement and doing the right thing and being out there to help others was sort of that goal. And so early on, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do, and that the FBI would be my ultimate goal.
Wow. So why FBI? Why did you even start to think of that as a goal?
I really wanted to be a profiler because I love psychology. And psychology for me, which was my major in college, and then I ended up, finding through some of my mentors that I'll talk about maybe down the road, but a master's degree in forensic psychology, which was brand new, which was, intersecting this criminality with psychology, and I just think that just was the driver for me to sort of go out there and help people and figure out not what people do, but why they do it. Because if you think about that, and I teach this again, and if you wanted to harm somebody, you could harm them in a number of different ways, stab them, shoot them, poison them, suffocate them, whatever it is. But my main goal was to figure out why did you want to do that to somebody? And that became the psychology of it. And that's what I used throughout my career to help me get through some of the success I had.
Yeah, I'm sure the amount of stories you have from, obviously you have the headliners, right? The ones that, we've mentioned in your bio here, introducing you. But I'm sure there's a lot of other cases that you've investigated that with people to find out the why behind what they did, and I'm sure the stories you have are just unbelievable.
I'll tell you, the most proud were the cases I worked with against children, or children that were kidnapped or abducted, and finding a resolution to that, and hopefully it was a positive one, and working on people that chose children as predators, and those cases are the ones I got satisfaction from. And a lot of times you don't necessarily, you think of the higher profile ones, but to me, all of those mattered.
Yeah. And taking what you do into help anybody listening to this podcast episode, wherever they're at in their career, you obviously have been in a lot of different complex situations, a lot of high pressure situations, a lot of really tense moments, right? I'm sure that's something anybody can relate to in their job or career when you're pursuing success. There's a lot of different areas where you can have pressure and a lot of stakes and a lot of risks involved. How have you learned to maintain focus and resilience when pursuing something that's just flat out stressful, just tough to go after?
I think that's one of the most important things you can do is persist through stress. And a lot of times stress and fear, those are the two biggest things that sort of hold us back from making advancements. You have to absolutely be persistent. And I tell this to students all the time. I didn't walk out of graduate school and walk into the FBI. It took me 3 agencies to get to where I was going. And I think about that all the time. I say, listen, persistence and perseverance and never saying I can't, and avoiding negativity and being positive and focus. You got to stay on task. And a lot of times that helped me through some of the complexity of cases that I was involved in, because we have a tendency to get, distracted by things. And if you can put those distractions aside, maybe learn from them, but stay on task and stay focused, it'll really help you with your success.
I think it's pretty unique opportunity that you're in, where you've had your career and you've had the experiences you've had, but now you're in a situation where you have students at Gannon, so you get to see this younger generation, right, of kids coming up, different backgrounds, different circumstances, life, and just where we're at in today's environment is just different. For anybody who's a younger person listening to this podcast, do you see challenges that are unique and different to them that they're facing based on what you're seeing with your students? Like, is the idea of persistence and sticking to something regardless of stress and fear, is it the same problems that kids had 20 years ago as they have now, or do you see it's different nowadays?
I think it's even more difficult nowadays because of social media, and they have a ton of different things that they have to deal with, including it being all out there. And I have to tell them, listen, do not put yourself out there, because that is where people can see, and employers and organizations, and they're seeing exactly what everybody else is, and that may hold you back even further from what you're trying to do. So don't make it difficult all by yourself, when life is already hard enough, so,
yeah.
And I tell them it's all about integrity. And when I teach, the main thing that I gotta really stress with students is, if you have anything else in this field, it's gotta be above reproach in the integrity side. Bias, any prejudice, it's got to be put away. You can't be effective in this job if you don't treat everybody right.
Wow.
And they know when they leave my classroom, you're out there serving. We lose that in law enforcement sometimes. You think, well, we got to arrest. And we do need to still do that when people continually violate the law. But that's not your first go-to. Your first go-to should be, hey, I'm here to protect and serve. It's written on the side of the cars, that we drive. Protect and serve. So make sure you're serving.
Yeah.
Treating people like they need to be treated before you go to that level that, you have to be.
Sure.
That for people who aren't, wanting the help.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And certainly I'm sure the students leave your classes maybe coming into it expecting one thing and then leaving with something totally different, just because of that insight that you have, and not just the X's and O's on how to do your job, but what it really takes to be successful in this career field.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, we get caught up in the power of law enforcement, because it is a position of power, but you never can abuse that power, because you can't get it back. And the same if you do things that are wrong in order to catch somebody who's doing wrong, you're as bad as what they are in my mind. So it's got to be above reproach.
I love the topic of leadership. I've always just been very, love learning from other people about leadership. For me, it's probably started off when I was in college, and, you start to look at athletes, and then it starts to expand beyond that to business successful people, or people like yourself, successful in your career. When it comes to leadership, can you talk to us a little about your approach to leadership based on what you've learned, in your career?
Couldn't be more of an important topic, leadership. The first thing I see in a leader is, you got to be able to do the things that you're expecting somebody else to do. And I think people respect that. If you're willing to do what you're asking them to do, I think you gain respect. The second thing about leadership that I think, and again, that's leading by example. The second thing about leadership and my approach to leadership is, if you have a good team in place, give them what they need to do their job and get out of their way, right? Be there to structure or to guide or to provide support.
Yeah.
But my goodness, let them do their thing, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times leaders want to always be micromanaging and in the middle of things, and I think it actually makes it worse.
Yeah, well, I can certainly see both sides for me for sure. I'm sure I've been somebody who I would think of myself, I don't micromanage, but sometimes it's like, well, I want to make sure that project is successful, right? So I'm sure that control aspect as a leader can sometimes be difficult to just let go and trust your team.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And if you selected the team around you, especially, you got to know that, hey, you got to trust that.
Yeah.
And you got to trust that they're going to do the right thing. Now, I'm not saying that there's not guidance needed, because, again,
Right.
that's what a true leader does. But at the same time, allowing them to make some choices and do some things that you've really tasked them to do.
Certainly, yeah. It's not just totally disregarding, okay, that person's good and not taking responsibility as a leader to make sure it's successful, but let them do what they need to do. Watch them, guide them, mentor them, right? As all part of it. Yeah.
That's all part of it.
Yeah.
And then again, them knowing that you would do the same thing that they would do, I think provides that leadership by example that I talked about.
Certainly.
Yeah.
How about when it comes to prioritizing tasks, right? Any of us, any given day can wake up and our phones are going off with 10 million alerts, and you walk into the office and there's this fire, that fire. And how do you, manage your time in terms of choosing the things that are going to be the most effective and prioritizing them?
I think, it's almost where it has the answer in the question. In prioritizing is the most important. It's a triage, right? It'd be like if you're working in the medical emergency room and you're dealing with the most serious things first. But it's definitely where you got to pay attention to what needs accomplished first. You got to be organized. There's so many times that being disorganized causes you more problems, and now you have not only the original problems you have, but you have an additional set of problems. So my organization skills, while I consider myself not the most intelligent person in the world, I consider myself very organized. And so even when I was doing a PhD, the FBI sent me back for a PhD, right? It's called the University Education Program through the FBI. And you get selected throughout the country. There's only a few people they'll send back. And I was trying to figure out, wow, how am I going to do this? It was so unbelievably filled with work. And I'll never forget one time I'm sitting in an office in my house, and I came out. I had a project, and there was so much going on. And again, back to all this that you have trying to figure out what you need to prioritize. And I walked out of my office at my house, and I went to my wife, who was in the kitchen. I said, Danielle, you know what? I'm an FBI agent. I got a master's degree. I don't need this.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, the look on her face was like, what are you talking about? And she said, get back in there. She said, get back in there and get this thing figured out. And she was right. Because so many times your first go-to is, hey, I don't have to do this. I don't need this. No, you do need to. You just have to, persist again. And then you have to stay organized. And I went back in that room and organized what I needed to do and what I needed to get done first, and slowly got through it.
Yeah.
And that's how you get through some of these real issues.
Well, I think we all need somebody like that. Even the almighty Jerry Clark here.
Yes.
You needed a little push too, right?
Little push.
Because I think it's very easy for anybody to look at you and be like, oh, he's got it all together. No wonder why he became successful. But that's just a little story there and an example of how we all need somebody to even give us a little push sometimes.
You bet. Whether it's a mentor, whether it's a parent. My mother was a driver of education, and I never understood it. I kept saying, what are you thinking of, driver? It's not if you're, it's you are. And so you need that push sometimes. And then you realize when you're at your weakest moment that you think, oh my gosh, I don't need this or that. Yes, you do. You just have to, stop feeling sorry for myself, which I was doing.
Yeah.
And buckle in and get it done.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote I heard a long time ago, but it's failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
That's exactly right.
And I just think about what you're talking about there with, taking time to organize yourself. It does take time to prepare. to be organized, to set things how you need to do it. But I tell you what, I feel so much better about myself and what I'm doing when I take that sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes half an hour, sometimes an hour to get things set up, organize myself, regroup. Now I'm ready to go tackle the next challenge.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's something about the feeling you get when you know you're prepared.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And that's what organization does.
Yep. So you mentioned a little moment there in which you're kind of, your words on mine, feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah, no doubt.
Have you had other moments throughout your career in which you've had challenges or setbacks? And then what did you learn through that? What advice can we get from you in regards to facing challenges and setbacks?
Well, even if you start to look at the big case, right, the pizza bomber,
Yeah.
There were so many challenges with that. And when you think about it, it kept unraveling, you know. So you had obviously the bank robbery and the death. Then you have 3 days later, a second pizza delivery driver dies. And then 2 weeks later, there's a guy in the freezer at Bill Rothstein's house. So it kept unraveling. And I kept thinking, you know, and then Rothstein died. Marjorie Deal's incompetent to stand trial, so I can't interview her. There were so many things going on.
Wow.
And you know what was really upsetting were people, you know, talking about it, saying, and there was even, you know, so-called experts from FBI. I remember specifically one person that said, if they don't know it's Marjorie Deal and Bill Rothstein, then the investigator should be delivering pizzas. And I'd hear these things and talk about challenges, you know, and we knew what was going on, but you have this little thing called burden of proof and evidence, and Judge Trisilla will tell you, don't bring me that without evidence.
Yeah.
So those challenges, you have to fight against taking it personal. You have to fight against giving up. You have to fight against thinking we're never going to get to the end of this, because those thoughts ran through all of our minds.
Yeah.
And we just said, no, we're not going to let that happen. We are going to persist through this and get to the bottom.
So I'm imagining there's probably moments of doubt where, as you said, you knew what was going on, but to get to where you wanted this case to go, I'm sure you had moments of doubt. Geez, can we really even put this together here of what we need to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There were so many times
Yeah.
when we thought, are we going to get to the end of this and get the evidence that we need to go to court? And I'm telling you, the highest levels of the FBI were asking about this.
Wow.
So the director of the FBI, who briefs the president of the United States, was asking, because they didn't know if this was a terrorist event,
Sure.
that it was going to happen again in a minute, 5 minutes, 6 months, you know, it could have happened again, or if this was a one-off like it turned out to be. But it was highly, highly complex and scrutinized. And so there were plenty of times we could have given up and we didn't.
That's amazing. There's a lot of different directions I can go just on that alone. Any other lessons through the Pizza Bomber case that, or any other, you know, high-profile cases that you've covered that you'd like to share with us? Just lessons you've learned through the lens of law enforcement, but things that any of us as professionals can apply to really our careers in terms of, you know, whether it was teamwork, collaboration. You know, you're talking about setbacks and overcoming those, persistence. Just any lessons that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think the first thing is make sure you network, okay? Because we're never going to do things alone sometimes. And it's good to have connectivity. It's good to have people helping. It's good to have teamwork.
Yeah.
There were personalities in that case that really did not get along, and agencies that did not get along. And I mean, to the point, and we don't talk about it too much, but where it got very high level intense. And so my job as the leader was to make sure that people could still have that same intensity, but use it together as a team. And a lot of times we thought, oh my goodness, this is this is going to blow up because of the pressure. And the pressure is intense. So my thought when answering your question is, listen, work with the people that you have. Make sure that you're the one guiding them to work together and not opposed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that will really cause problems. And so if you can keep people working on the same track, keep them focused and keep them persistent, I think that's going to help you in anything you do, whether that's going through med school or going, working at your job in insurance. Or stay focused, utilize all your resources, and use them together to help each other out. And I think that's the best advice I can give.
I just this week was watching on Netflix a documentary, the Redeem Team, the 2008 Olympic basketball team. And I love learning from how Coach K pulled all these NBA stars. You're talking Kobe, LeBron, all these guys Dwayne Wade together at the prime of their career. And, some of the things that they talk about in there is creating that team atmosphere by, they were joking and laughing together and doing these party, just different things to create that unity. And I'm hearing you talk, and I'm like, you guys don't have time to do a pizza party, no pun intended with the... Right. That's exactly you guys don't have time to do these joking moments, create the bonds of teamwork between these different agencies. I mean, this is high pressure. You got to get everybody on the same page to move toward a goal together. Totally different dynamic and situations, but I was thinking of the dichotomy of the two situations in my mind about how vastly different but still effective leaders can be in their unique roles. But what you had to do to pull these people together.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example that you bring up because it's still the same end game, which is the bonding. It's the understanding of each other. A lot of times we don't understand each other. And the main reason of that, and I tell this to students all the time, we don't listen, right? We always want to talk, and we always want to profess things and show your way. But if you actually took the time to listen to other people and hear what they're saying, there's benefit there. And you have to utilize the strengths that everybody puts together. I ended up on a task force in Dayton, Ohio, out of the Cincinnati division of the FBI. And you took, Dayton police officers, Montgomery County sheriffs, U.S. Marshal, FBI, all from different backgrounds and experiences, and put them on a team. And now you're saying, oh, Jerry, run this Miami Valley, task force of violent crimes and fugitives. And you say, wow, how can we make this the most success? And the first thing I had to figure out is you have to check your ego at the door. And people won't do that all the time. You got to actually, and I'm the biggest leader in that, where I feel I don't have an ego. I have confidence, and I have self-respect, and I have goals and drives and ambitions, but I don't have an ego. One of the greatest pieces of information I ever got was down at the FBI Academy, and it was a communications class, and it was not a retired agent, but he was in his twilight.
Sure.
And he was an older guy, and his nickname was Coach. And he was an FBI agent, but they called him Coach. And Coach came into class, and he said, the best piece of advice I'm going to give you for your whole career. And everyone's sitting on the edge of their seat going, oh, what is this? What is this? And he said, treat everybody as if they're a potential somebody. And I'm sitting there going, well, what the hell does that mean? And he goes, I don't care if it's the person cleaning the room or the CEO running the building. Treat them all the same. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. And basically what he's saying is, check your ego at the door. You don't need to have an ego. And let me give you a quick example, if you don't mind, of when this happened that I think was absolutely, positively a result of what he told me. Every day I'd walk into when I got transferred home, by the way, to Erie, I was the most proud FBI agent you could ever be.
I bet.
It was like I hit the lottery.
Right.
I'd come home and do that job here.
Yes.
So I'm walking into the building, 717 State, and I always saw this one guy out sitting in between the two buildings, between the bank and the building. And I'd stop and I'd talk to him, hey, how you doing? And he looked like he was down on his luck. If I had, some cash, I'd give it to him. But it wasn't about the cash.
Yeah.
It was the fact that I was talking to him. And I'd say, what's going on today? And I'd actually sit on the bench with him.
Yeah.
What's going on today? Now, I didn't do that for any reason other than I felt like everybody's somebody, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, we have a bank robbery in Erie, and I'm, in the middle of it, running around. I come back to the office to get some items, and there is that guy. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm really busy.
Yeah.
But he's looking at me, he waves, and I go over to him. I said, hey, what's going on for you? And I literally had 100 things to do.
Right, yes.
And he looks at me, he said, tough day today? And I said, yeah, it is. And he said, bank robbery. Now he's piqued my attention. I go, yeah, bank robbery. He said, check this address. Guy over there buying a lot of crack. And I know where he got the money. And I said, hey, thanks a lot. Went back upstairs, did some due diligence, did some surveillance.
Right.
Sure enough, there was our bank robber.
Wow.
So do you see where that led you from, hey, treating somebody right? He would have never talked to me.
No.
If I hadn't taken the time to treat him like a somebody.
Wow.
And that's one of the most important life lessons I ever learned.
I got chills listening to that story because that was not orchestrated by you. It wasn't like you knew that this guy was connected and that was the amazing FBI professional work you were doing.
No.
That was you taking the advice from somebody who told you exactly that. And you treated him like he was somebody. And because of that, because your character integrity, what we started off the podcast talking about.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. That person
it all circles back.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell these new students, you have to do that. Because think about this. Unless you were in the middle of the crime when it happened and you observed it yourself, you're depending on two things. One, somebody telling you what happened. And two, forensic science putting DNA there and then you can match that. But the first one's the most important. Somebody's got to tell you what happened.
Yeah.
And if you don't treat people right or you're callous or you're rude, people, they're not going to talk to people who are like that to them.
Yeah.
Right? So I train them. Listen, this is how you treat people, right? And it works.
And it's a lot different in the real world than we see on TV shows and how they might hype it up to be.
Yeah.
It's
so
like
different.
people don't just give answers all willy-nilly just because you're a tough guy, you walk into the room, right?
Not a chance. They won't like you, they won't talk to you.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. And, one of my papers that I have students write, it's really called the CSI Effect. And I'll have them watch a television show. Any of them, CSI, Law and Order, I don't care what it is, NCIS, and tell me how they investigated that crime, right? Yeah. And how they got to the end. And you will see the difference when I'm training you on how they really are investigated and how you get to the end.
Right.
And their eyes are wide open from it.
Being in the field is a lot different than a show that's meant for entertainment purposes to a general audience, right?
You bet.
Yeah.
Because now that I do entertainment show, I work on shows with different producers. To this day, I'm working on a number of different projects, and I'll say, well, if you want to stay to the reality, this is the reality. And they say, well, we also have to lead it to episode 2 and season 2, and so there's got to be some catch for them.
Yeah,
so,
they need people to come back for the show.
You bet.
Yeah,
you bet.
That's funny. And just to ask you another question on that topic of ego, I think for me, the alpha male, right? That's kind of like a funny term, but I think about somebody from your background in law enforcement, the ultimate, man, like, leading, a unit and solving crimes and doing these things. But here you are talking about checking your ego at the door. Yeah. Meanwhile, you still have to be that person that can take charge of a situation as if you have the biggest ego in the room, right? Sometimes. So how do you balance the two?
So you read the person you're interviewing, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to come along a little stronger. And then sometimes they're looking for somebody to be more of a listener and a therapist as they're telling you some of the most vile things in the world they've ever done. And I think of pedophiles or people that I've interviewed that when I've actually started interviewing, you come across as, oh my gosh, first thing you want to think of is that's the worst, most vile thing I've ever heard in my life, and I want to, come across the desk at you.
Right.
But that's not my job at that moment. My job is to figure out what it is they're trying to tell me. And a lot of times I've had them tell me at the end, I'm so glad you're here because I hated what I was doing too.
Wow.
But if I would have been berating them and telling them what, type of person they were, I would have never got there.
Yeah.
So that's not my job in the interview. So interview and interrogation in my job is everything. And it's all about the psychology of how to treat people.
I hate to drop another quote, but another thing I just always remember, it start with the end in mind. So if your goal is to get to having this person confide in you, talk with you, you have to start that conversation right along the lines of how you want it to end. Meaning, if you come into it all, strong, tough, like you said, I'm sure there's people you've sat across, you just wanted to flat out punch them in the face, I'm sure. Because of what
I can't
done.
believe what you did.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But you got to be able to know what you're trying to accomplish, right? That end goal of what you're doing for your job.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and I want to say investigators, they can't allow themselves to do that. And so you're not going to be successful that way.
Yeah.
Real success is being able to look at the end game, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It's the end game that you got to get to.
And we're, of course, talking specifically to, in crime investigations, things like this, but I could see across many different professions and industries, you're sitting across prospective clients and you want the conversation to resolve. And obviously you get in their business, you need to be able to develop these skills of listening like you talked about, not having an ego, these different things that you've been sharing to, ultimately try to earn people's business and trust and whatnot.
It is. It's a salesmanship quality that leads to success in law enforcement. And then you throw in Miranda, and that makes it even more challenging. So we're really fighting upstream where we say, hey, wait, stop. You don't have to tell me anymore. If you can't afford a lawyer, I'll get you one.
Yeah.
You have the right to remain silent. All those things that you add in there that make the interview even more challenging or the interrogation more challenging. So it's a salesmanship that you have to be very good at and very skilled at. Yeah.
I can imagine so, and even as we've said, higher stakes than what you're doing, compared to other maybe industries and whatnot. Just a couple more questions for you if you got the time as we wind down on the podcast here. One of the things I like to talk about as well is mentorship. I think it's so crucial to development. Regardless of where you're at, whether you're a college student listening to this episode or somebody later in your career, you want to continue to advance where you're at. Can you talk about the role of mentorship and maybe what advice you'd have for people on gaining mentorship and why it's so valuable?
That is such an important topic, and it's such an important word, right? And you can't take it lightly. People are watching you. People are observing you, and especially younger students or children, they watch what we do. And if you're setting bad examples and you're not being a good mentor, you're going to set yourself up or themselves up for a real difficult, challenging life.
Yeah.
I take that very seriously. So when a child or a student, they could be in the 8th grade and I'll hear, hey, can I talk to you about the FBI or law enforcement? And I'm thinking, well, there's so many years from there till there. But hey, if I can guide them or put them on the right path, I'm going to try to talk to them and I'm going to try to mentor. And people don't accept that responsibility enough, I don't think.
Yeah.
We really have to take the time to do that. Here I teach at Gannon, right? And I have all my students and I have all these internships and I'll have students from other colleges who are home for the summer that'll call me, and I'm thinking, well, you probably have an advisor or you probably have a professor at your university, but they're calling me, and I still will help them.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I don't care if you don't go to Gannon, if you go somewhere else, I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
Because I feel that's my role.
Yeah.
And, God has graced me with some real success in the field, and I want to share that.
Yeah.
And mentorship could not be more important.
And I think you hit on both ends, the need for people to be willing to be mentors, right? Take the time to be open, to help people who are reaching out. And then on the other side, be somebody who's going to take initiative to reach out to somebody like yourself or somebody in their perspective field of where they want to go, just to offer to buy them coffee or lunch or just meet with them. Just sit down, pick their brain for half an hour, an hour of their time and just, learn from their experiences, like I like to do with the podcast here, being able to learn from someone like yourself. Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you have this podcast because I listen to them all and I hear and learn from people who've been successful and how they got to where they got. And everybody has a different road to where they get to, but it's really about that drive to do well and be successful and helping others. And mentorship is part of that.
Well, I appreciate you being a listener to the podcast as well.
Yes.
I'm glad you've been on my list to have on, so I'm glad you accepted to come on as a guest. And so last question for you, and if you've been a listener, I'm sure you know the bonus question, but if you could go back in time and speak at your prep graduation of the class of 1978, but knowing what you know now, based on your career, your life experiences, where you've been, what would you say to your classmates if you were, back then, talking to them?
Wow, is that a great question? I love it. I absolutely love it because I certainly would love to talk to the class of 78. And I would tell them, look, I sat amongst you. I was not the brightest. I was not the best in grades. I was not the best athlete. I tried very hard. But one thing, everybody advances at different stages and processes and speeds. So you may not have peaked in high school. You may peak at college. You may peak at graduate school. You may peak in your career. But the main thing is never stop learning, okay? Because if we think we know everything, we're never going to advance. You can always keep learning every day. And you can always, again, go back to being the person that can help other people. Take yourself as selfless, right? Check your ego at the door, like we said 100 times today, and be humble, but be proud. And I'll tell you what, the success that's come out of the chairs that you're sitting in right now is unbelievable. If you think of the people that walk these halls at Cathedral Prep and have gone on to do, and Villa, now Cathedral Prep, that have gone on to do amazing things, go out there and be one of them. And the world is yours. And I got to tell you, there's nothing that stops you except your own limitations.
Amen to that, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Jerry, that's good stuff.
Oh, man. I can't thank Prep enough for what they did for me personally. Again, it wasn't always easy.
Yeah.
And I gotta emphasize that to anybody listening. Life is not easy. And there's going to be pitfalls. And there's going to be roadblocks. Don't put them up yourself, which is the first thing I can tell you. And the second thing is go around them when you have them. Because there's always an end game.
Yeah.
And Prep gave me the motivation, the drive, and the success in my mind of what's out there to reach.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so cool hearing from the beginning of this episode about how you ended up at Prep ultimately with your parents really, forcing you, pushing you to go there. The success you paid for your brothers.
Yes. I take full credit for that.
But I tell you what, I've learned a lot from this podcast episode. I know our listeners have as well. And I love seeing you at our Legacy Gala events, the reunions.
Yes.
It's always fun, and we appreciate everything you do coming back to the school. I'm sure, speaking to the students, doing this podcast episode. Can't say enough nice things about you, Jerry. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And again, credit to my wife, Danielle, my son, Michael, graduate of Prep, my daughter, Isabel, graduate of Villa, who have both gone on to success. It's out there for you, folks. Go get it.
Absolutely. Roll Ramblers.
Roll Ramblers. Thanks for having me.